There is a question that haunts every consequential decision, a silent ghost in the boardroom, a whisper in the ear of every leader, every entrepreneur, every individual standing at a crossroads. It's a question of action, of consequence, of the uncertain path forward. We seek clarity, a formula, some complex algorithm to tell us what to do. We build spreadsheets, we consult experts, we weigh probabilities. And yet, the most powerful tool for navigating this fog of uncertainty comes not from a supercomputer or a high-priced consultant, but from the profoundly simple mind of a man from Omaha, Nebraska. It's a test so brutally effective, so fundamentally clarifying, that it has served as the bedrock for one of the greatest capital allocation engines in human history. Warren Buffett, the architect of Berkshire Hathaway, has a net worth that fluctuates with the market, but he possesses an asset that is far more valuable, an asset he has spent a lifetime compounding, his reputation. And the tool he uses to protect that asset, the filter through which he passes every major decision, is what we will call the newspaper test. The thesis is this: before you take any action, you must ask yourself if you would be willing to see it described, in detail, by an intelligent but unfriendly reporter on the front page of your local newspaper, to be read by your friends, your family, and your neighbors. This isn't a legal test. It's not a profitability test. It is a character test. It is the ultimate antidote to the sweet siren song of short-term thinking and the thousand small temptations to cut ethical corners for immediate gain. It forces you to adopt a long-term perspective, to view your actions not through the narrow lens of the present moment, but through the wide, unforgiving lens of your legacy. As Buffett himself has stated, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. This test is your 5-minute fire drill. It is the simple, elegant, and final promise you make to yourself about the person you intend to be. And today, we are going to deconstruct this mental model piece by piece to understand not just what it is, but why it is the single most important decision-making framework for achieving lasting success in both business and life. We will begin by exploring the foundational truth that underpins the entire concept, the reality that in the grand game of wealth and influence, your reputation is the only true currency. To understand why a simple mental exercise like the newspaper test became the cornerstone of Warren Buffett's empire, you have to travel back to the sweltering summer of 1991. The world of high finance was about to be rocked by a scandal that threatened to bring one of its most storied institutions, Salomon Brothers, to its knees. This wasn't just another Wall Street mishap. This was an existential crisis, a 5-alarm fire raging at the heart of the American financial system. And in the center of it all, against his own preference for a quiet life in Omaha, was Warren Buffett, whose company Berkshire Hathaway was Salomon's largest shareholder with a $700 million preferred stock investment. The story begins with a man named Paul Moser, a star trader on Salomon's government bond desk. He was a master of a very specific, very lucrative universe, the world of U.S. Treasury auctions. The rules were clear. No single firm could bid for more than 35% of the bonds in any given auction, a rule designed to prevent a single player from cornering the market. But Moser, driven by a culture that prized profits above all else, found a way around it. He submitted illegal bids, using the names of Salomon's own clients without their permission, effectively giving Salomon control over a vast swath of the market. This wasn't just bending the rules. It was a flagrant violation of federal law. For months, this deception went unnoticed. But in the spring of 1991, the truth began to bubble to the surface. By August, the scandal exploded onto the front pages of every major newspaper. The U.S. Treasury Department didn't just slap Salomon on the wrist, it banned the firm from bidding in its auctions altogether. For a bond-trading powerhouse like Salomon Brothers, this was a death sentence. It was like telling a brewery it could no longer buy hops. Panic ensued. The firm's stock price cratered. Their clients, fearing the company would collapse, began pulling their business en masse. The firm was facing a catastrophic liquidity crisis. Within days, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. The chairman, John Gutfreund, once lionized as the King of Wall Street, was forced to resign in disgrace, along with other top executives. The firm was headless, bleeding cash, and universally condemned. This is the moment when Warren Buffett enters the picture. He wasn't just a passive investor. He was now the man whose $700 million was about to evaporate. He flew to New York for an emergency board meeting. And what he found was pure chaos. The very survival of Salomon Brothers hung by a thread. The then Treasury Secretary, Nicholas Brady, was receiving calls from central bankers around the world, terrified that the collapse of Salomon would trigger a global financial contagion. Brady needed someone, anyone, to step in and restore order, to be a credible voice of integrity. He made it clear that the only person he would trust to save the firm was Warren Buffett. Buffett, a man who cherished his quiet life of reading and thinking, was being asked to take the helm as interim CEO of a burning ship in the middle of a hurricane. He accepted, not because he wanted the job, but because he understood the stakes. He knew that the problem wasn't just about illegal trades. It was about a catastrophic failure of reputation. Salomon hadn't just broken the law, it had broken the sacred trust of the market. On his first day, he addressed the thousands of terrified Salomon employees. He didn't talk about profit margins or trading strategies. He talked about the one thing that mattered. He famously said, "Lose money for the firm, and I will be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm, and I will be ruthless." This one sentence became the new constitution of Salomon Brothers. It was a complete reversal of the old culture. He then went before a subcommittee of the U.S. Congress, under the full glare of the national media, and he did something that corporate leaders almost never do. He didn't deflect. He didn't make excuses. He apologized, unequivocally. He laid out the wrongdoing in stark detail and described the steps he was taking to build a new culture of compliance and ethics. He was applying the newspaper test in reverse. The story was already on the front page, and his job was to write a new one of accountability and reform. He cooperated fully with regulators, established a new code of conduct, and made it clear that any hint of ethical corner-cutting would be grounds for immediate dismissal. This act of radical transparency and absolute commitment to integrity worked. It was the only thing that could have worked. The Treasury Department, convinced by Buffett's personal guarantee of integrity, lifted its ban, allowing Salomon to resume its business. The capital fled back in. The firm was saved from the brink of oblivion. This episode is the foundational anecdote for the newspaper test because it illustrates the concept in the most extreme way possible. The leaders at Salomon before Buffett had failed the test spectacularly. They had tolerated actions they would have been horrified to see on the front page, all for short-term profit. The result was near total destruction. Buffett's success in saving the firm had nothing to do with financial engineering and everything to do with reputation management. He understood that the billions of dollars on Salomon's balance sheet were worthless without the intangible asset of trust. He staked his own pristine reputation, his life's work of building character, to save the company. He demonstrated that reputation isn't a soft public relations concept. It is the ultimate hard asset, the bedrock upon which all financial value is built. To truly grasp the genius of Buffett's newspaper test, we have to look beneath the surface of the Salomon Brothers story and into the deep, often irrational wiring of the human mind. The test works so effectively because it acts as a powerful counterweight to several deeply ingrained cognitive biases that constantly push us toward poor, short-sighted decisions. It is a piece of psychological technology designed to protect us from ourselves. At its core, the newspaper test is a weapon against the halo effect. The halo effect is a cognitive bias where our overall impression of a person, company, or brand influences our feelings and thoughts about their specific character or properties. If we see a person as attractive or likable, we are more likely to assume they are also intelligent and competent. In the world of business, a sterling reputation creates a powerful positive halo. When a company like Berkshire Hathaway, with its reputation for integrity and long-term thinking, announces an investment, the market reacts positively. People assume the decision is sound, the due diligence was thorough, and the strategy is brilliant, all because of the halo created by decades of consistent, ethical behavior. This halo is an incredible business advantage. It smooths the path for every negotiation. It attracts the highest quality talent who want to be associated with a winner, and it creates a loyal customer base that gives the company the benefit of the doubt. It lowers the cost of capital because lenders trust the firm's leadership. It allows for unique partnerships, like the Salomon Brothers rescue, where the U.S. Treasury was willing to bet on Buffett's personal halo to stabilize the entire financial system. The executives at the old Salomon Brothers ignored this. They believed their reputation for being the smartest, most aggressive traders on Wall Street was their primary asset. But this was a narrow, fragile halo. The moment it was revealed that their aggression crossed the line into illegality, that halo didn't just fade, it inverted. It became a horns effect, where the company's every action was viewed with suspicion and contempt. Their reputation for aggression was reframed as a reputation for corruption, and the entire edifice of their success crumbled. The newspaper test forces you to consider the halo you are building with every single action. It makes you ask, will this act polish my halo, or will it begin to tarnish it? Another key psychological principle at play is social proof. We are social creatures, hardwired to look to others for cues on how to behave, especially in situations of uncertainty. A strong reputation is the ultimate form of social proof. It signals to the world that you are a reliable, trustworthy partner. When Rose Blumkin of Nebraska Furniture Mart, a woman who built a billion-dollar company on the motto, "Sell cheap and tell the truth," agreed to sell her business to Warren Buffett, the deal was famously sealed with a simple handshake. Buffett didn't need to spend months on exhaustive audits. Mrs. B's reputation, built over a lifetime, was all the social proof he needed. It was a credible signal of her character and the quality of her business. The newspaper test brilliantly harnesses this principle by forcing you to imagine your actions being read by your community, your family, your friends, your colleagues. It activates your innate desire for positive social proof. It makes you consider whether your actions will lead people to view you as a leader to be emulated or as a cautionary tale to be avoided. The shame of being judged negatively by one's tribe is a profoundly powerful motivator, far more potent than the abstract threat of a fine or a legal penalty. It taps into a primal part of our brain concerned with social standing and acceptance. Finally, the test helps us override our natural tendency towards self-serving rationalizations. Our brains are masters of justification. When faced with a tempting but ethically dubious shortcut, we can construct elaborate arguments for why it's not that bad, everyone does it, or the rules are unfair. The newspaper test shatters these internal narratives. It forces you to translate your private rationalization into a public headline. The thought process, "I'll just fudge these numbers a little to meet the quarterly target. It will correct itself next quarter," sounds plausible in the echo chamber of your own mind. But when you are forced to imagine the headline, "Local executive admits to falsifying financial reports," the self-deception collapses. The cold, harsh light of public scrutiny exposes the rationalization for what it is, a weak excuse for a bad decision. In essence, the newspaper test acts as an external conscience, a psychological circuit breaker that interrupts our flawed mental programming and forces a moment of brutal honesty, protecting us from our own worst instincts. Understanding the power of a strong reputation is one thing, building one is another entirely. The newspaper test isn't just a passive philosophical concept, it is an active, applied mental model. It's a blueprint for decision-making that anyone, from a CEO managing a multinational corporation to an entrepreneur launching their first startup, can implement immediately. Let's break down the step-by-step process of turning this idea into a practical, repeatable habit that safeguards your career and your business. The first step in this applied blueprint is to create your own personal front page. This is a visualization exercise, but it requires concrete action. Take out a piece of paper or open a new document. At the top, Write the name of your local newspaper, or perhaps the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, whatever publication would feel most real and consequential to you. Now, think of a decision you are currently wrestling with. It could be a major business strategy decision, like whether to acquire a competitor, or a more personal career choice, like whether to accept a new job offer. It could even be a seemingly small operational choice, like how to handle a customer complaint or a mistake made by a subordinate. Now, you must become that intelligent but unfriendly reporter. Your job is not to be your own public relations agent. It is to report the facts, unvarnished. Write the headline for the story about the action you are contemplating. Be specific and unflinching. For example, if you're thinking of using a lower quality material to cut costs without informing your customers, the headline isn't "Company innovates to improve margins." The headline is "Local manufacturer secretly switches to cheaper, inferior materials in flagship product." If you are considering laying off a loyal long-term employee just before they are due to receive their pension benefits, the headline is not "Firm streamlines operations for a more efficient future." It is "Your company name lays off 30-year veteran employee months before pension payout." The goal is to strip away all the corporate jargon and self-serving language and state the plain, simple truth of the action. The second step is to write the first paragraph of the article. This is where you add the crucial context. Who is affected by this decision? What are the immediate consequences for them? Include names, figures, and the direct impact. For instance, the decision to switch materials, according to an internal memo, will save the company approximately $1.2 million annually, but internal testing revealed the new material may reduce the product's lifespan by up to 40%. Long-time customers who have relied on the product's durability will be unaware of the change at the time of purchase. This exercise forces you to move beyond abstract concepts and confront the real-world, human consequences of your choice. The third and most critical step is the circle of readers visualization. Look at your mock front page. Now, create a list of 5 to 10 people whose opinions you value most in the world. This list is deeply personal. It might include your parents, your spouse, your children. It could be a mentor who guided your career, your first boss who gave you a chance, or your most respected peer. Now, one by one, vividly imagine each of these people picking up the newspaper on a Sunday morning, pouring their coffee, and seeing that headline with your name in it. Visualize their facial expression. Hear the conversation they might have with their spouse about it. What would your child think? What would your mentor feel? Pride or disappointment? This is the core of the test. It connects the abstract decision to your deepest emotional and social relationships. The feeling this visualization generates, either a knot of shame and dread in your stomach, or a sense of calm and pride, is your answer. That gut feeling is more accurate than any spreadsheet. The fourth step is to create a reputation roadmap based on the outcome. If the test produced a negative result, the path is clear. Don't do it. Find another way. The test has done its job. It has saved you from a catastrophic mistake. But if the action passes the test, if you would feel proud to have that story told, then you must document it. Write down why it passed the test. This action is consistent with our value of putting the customer first. This decision, though difficult, is the honest and transparent thing to do. This creates a record of your ethical decision-making, a corporate or personal logbook of integrity. This roadmap becomes a core part of your business strategy and personal development. It helps build a consistent corporate culture where employees at all levels can use the same framework. When a new difficult decision arises, you can refer back to this roadmap and ask, is this consistent with the kind of headlines we want to write for ourselves? This turns a reactive test into a proactive tool for building the exact reputation you desire, brick by brick, decision by decision. It's a system for operationalizing integrity. To truly appreciate the wisdom of Buffett's approach, it's essential to examine its opposite. We must dedicate ourselves to understanding the path of the 99%, the common, seductive, and ultimately disastrous approach that the newspaper test is designed to prevent. This is the path of the outer scorecard, a life and business strategy dictated not by an internal compass of integrity, but by the ever-shifting winds of external validation. The person or company living by the outer scorecard is obsessed with appearances. Their primary goal is not to be good, but to look good. They are slaves to quarterly earnings reports, to public relations spin, to vanity metrics, and to the opinions of people they don't even respect. Their decisions are not filtered through a lens of long-term character, but through the question, what will generate the most applause right now? This mindset inevitably leads to a culture of cutting corners. Why spend the money on higher quality materials when cheaper ones look the same for the first 6 months? Why invest in robust employee training and development when you can just burn through people and hire new ones? Why engage in the difficult, time-consuming work of genuine innovation when you can just create marketing hype around a mediocre product? The outer scorecard mentality fosters a deep-seated rot that may not be visible from the outside, but it hollows out the company from within. A perfect and tragic example of this is the story of Wells Fargo and its phantom accounts scandal. For years, the bank was the darling of Wall Street. Its stock soared, its executives were lauded, and its 8 is great strategy, pushing employees to sell at least 8 different financial products to every single customer, was hailed as a model of sales efficiency. This was the ultimate outer scorecard. The number 8 was the only thing that mattered. To the outside world, Wells Fargo looked like a stunning success. But inside, a toxic, high-pressure sales culture was festering. To meet their impossible quotas and keep their jobs, thousands of employees resorted to fraud. They secretly opened millions of unauthorized bank and credit card accounts in their customers' names, generating fees and hitting their targets. They were not evil people. They were ordinary individuals trapped in a system that rewarded unethical behavior. The leadership failed the newspaper test at every conceivable level. They incentivized actions they would have been horrified to see exposed. The imagined headline was always there, waiting to be written. Wells Fargo employees create millions of fake accounts to hit aggressive sales goals. For years, they managed to keep the story from breaking, living on borrowed time. When the scandal finally did erupt in 2016, the consequences were devastating. The bank was hit with billions of dollars in fines. Its CEO was forced to resign in disgrace after a brutal congressional hearing. But the financial cost paled in comparison to the reputational damage. The bank's folksy stagecoach and community image, carefully cultivated over a century, was shattered. Trust, the bedrock of any financial institution, evaporated overnight. Generations of customer loyalty were wiped out. The Wells Fargo case is a masterclass in the folly of the outer scorecard. The leadership was so focused on the applause of Wall Street analysts and the short-term boost in stock price that they ignored the cancer growing within their own corporate culture. Another classic antithesis is the "fake it till you make it" mantra that has become so popular in certain corners of the startup world. While it can sometimes be a harmless call for confidence, it often morphs into a justification for outright deception. The story of Theranos and its founder Elizabeth Holmes is the ultimate cautionary tale. Holmes crafted a brilliant external image. She adopted the black turtleneck of Steve Jobs, spoke in a deep, authoritative voice, and spun a compelling story of revolutionizing healthcare with a single drop of blood. She attracted hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital and a board of directors filled with political heavyweights. The outer scorecard was flawless. The problem was that the core technology didn't work. Instead of admitting failure and going back to the drawing board, an action that would have passed the newspaper test, Holmes and her company chose deception. They ran patient samples on competitors, machines, falsified data, and lied to investors, partners, and the public for years. The inevitable headline was "Theranos, the $9 billion blood testing startup, is a massive fraud." When that story finally broke, thanks to the investigative journalism of the Wall Street Journal, the collapse was swift and total. The company was worthless. Holmes was convicted of fraud. The story of the 99% is the story of choosing the easy wrong over the hard right. It's the belief that you can build a sustainable enterprise on a foundation of small lies and ethical compromises. But as the Salomon Brothers, Wells Fargo, and Theranos examples show, a reputation built on anything other than truth is a house of cards. The wind of public scrutiny will eventually blow, and the entire structure will come crashing down. The principles of the newspaper test are not mere philosophical abstractions. They have a direct, quantifiable, and massive impact on financial outcomes. Adhering to this mental model is not an act of charity or altruism. It is one of the most ruthless forms of financial wisdom and wealth protection available. Let's trace the direct connection from this ethical framework to the numbers on a balance sheet and the value of an investment portfolio. The most immediate financial benefit of a sterling reputation is a lower cost of capital. Capital is the lifeblood of any business, and it always comes at a price: the interest paid on debt or the equity given up to investors. That price is determined almost entirely by a lender's or investor's perception of risk. A company with a reputation for transparency, ethical leadership, and long-term thinking is perceived as less risky. Lenders are more willing to offer loans at lower interest rates because they trust the management to run the business soundly and honor its obligations. When Berkshire Hathaway needs to borrow money, it gets some of the best rates in the world, not just because of its size, but because of its pristine, 50-year track record of integrity. This isn't a small advantage. A single percentage point difference on billions of dollars in debt can translate into hundreds of millions of dollars in savings, money that flows directly to the bottom line and can be reinvested to compound future growth. Conversely, a company that fails the newspaper test and gets caught in a scandal sees its cost of capital skyrocket. Lenders will demand much higher interest rates to compensate for the increased risk, or they may refuse to lend at all. This can choke off a company's growth, or, in a crisis like the one Salomon Brothers faced, trigger a fatal liquidity crunch. A second powerful financial connection is the attraction and retention of top-tier talent. The most skilled, creative, and productive employees, the true drivers of innovation and value, have a choice of where to work. They are not just looking for a paycheck. They are looking to be part of an organization they can be proud of. A company known for its integrity and ethical culture becomes a magnet for A-plus players. This provides a huge competitive advantage. These firms can often hire the best people without having to pay the absolute top-of-the-market salary, because the non-monetary benefit of working in a positive, trustworthy environment has real value. Furthermore, employee turnover is much lower in these organizations, which drastically reduces recruitment and training costs. On the other hand, a company with a tarnished reputation struggles to attract talent. They have to overpay to lure people in, and they often end up with employees who are primarily motivated by money, not by the company's mission. This leads to a mercenary culture, low morale, and high turnover, all of which are a significant drag on productivity and profitability. The most powerful financial manifestation of the newspaper test is its effect on what accountants call goodwill. On a balance sheet, goodwill is an intangible asset that represents the portion of a business's value that isn't tied to its physical assets or liabilities. It is the value of its brand name, its customer relationships, and its reputation. For many of the world's most successful companies, this intangible asset is worth far more than all their factories and inventory combined. Coca-Cola's brand is worth vastly more than its bottling plants. Apple's reputation for design and quality is worth more than its retail stores. This goodwill is built over decades, through millions of individual transactions and decisions that passed the newspaper test. It creates pricing power, allowing a company to charge a premium for its products or services. It fosters customer loyalty, so that when a mistake inevitably happens, customers are more forgiving. Look at Johnson & Johnson's handling of the Tylenol crisis in 1982. When some bottles were found to be laced with cyanide by an unknown party, the company didn't hesitate. They passed the newspaper test with flying colors, immediately pulling all of their products from shelves nationwide at a cost of over $100 million, and developing new tamper-proof packaging. This decisive ethical action solidified their reputation for decades and translated into billions of dollars of sustained brand equity. The ultimate financial connection is in risk management and wealth protection. A single, catastrophic failure of the newspaper test can wipe out a lifetime of accumulated wealth. The fines, the lawsuits, the market capitalization losses following a major scandal routinely run into the tens of billions of dollars. For the executives involved, the personal financial toll can be total ruin, loss of career, forfeiture of bonuses, and crippling legal fees. The newspaper test is the cheapest and most effective insurance policy against this kind of asymmetric ruin. It costs nothing to implement, yet it can prevent the kind of mistake that destroys everything you've built. It is the very essence of long-term thinking, ensuring that the pursuit of today's dollar doesn't bankrupt tomorrow's enterprise. We live in an age of instant gratification. The modern world is a finely tuned machine designed to appeal to our most primal short-term impulses. From the endless scroll of social media to the relentless pressure of quarterly earnings reports, we are constantly being pushed to prioritize the immediate over the important. This is the psychological battlefield where the newspaper test serves as our most critical defense, and to wield it effectively, we must first understand the enemy, the cognitive traps hardwired into our brains. One of the most powerful of these traps is a phenomenon known as hyperbolic discounting. In simple terms, this is the tendency for people to increasingly choose a smaller, sooner reward over a larger, later reward. Our brains are programmed to value the present much more highly than the future. A marshmallow today is viscerally more appealing than 2 marshmallows tomorrow. This makes evolutionary sense. For our ancestors, an uncertain future meant that a guaranteed meal now was better than the promise of a bigger meal later, which might never materialize. But in the modern world of business and investing, this instinct is a liability. It is the voice that whispers, "Take the shortcut, close the ethically borderline deal. It will boost this quarter's numbers, and we can deal with the fallout later." Hyperbolic discounting explains why a company's leadership might choose to skip a costly but necessary safety upgrade on a factory floor. The immediate reward is a fatter profit margin for the current fiscal year. The larger, later reward is a safer workplace and the avoidance of a potential disaster years down the road. Because the disaster is a distant, abstract possibility and the profit is a concrete, immediate gain, our biased brains overweight the profit and underweight the risk. The newspaper test is a direct assault on hyperbolic discounting. It yanks the potential future consequence into the harsh, immediate present. The abstract fear of a potential future disaster becomes the visceral, gut-wrenching shame of imagining the headline, "Local factory's negligence leads to tragic accident." By making the future consequence emotionally immediate, the test helps our more rational, long-term thinking prefrontal cortex override the impulsive, short-term focused limbic system. Another critical anecdote from Buffett's life illustrates this perfectly: his decision to shut down Berkshire Hathaway's original textile business. When Buffett took control of Berkshire in the 1960s, it was a struggling New England textile mill. For 2 decades, he and his partner, Charlie Munger, tried to keep it alive. It was the company's namesake, steeped in history. Shutting it down would mean putting hundreds of loyal employees out of work in a town that depended on the mill. The easy, short-term path would have been to keep squeezing a few more years of marginal or even negative returns out of the business. They could have cut more corners, deferred more maintenance, and fought for government subsidies. This is the path many leaders, driven by emotional attachment and a desire to avoid immediate pain, would have chosen. But Buffett, applying his long-term logic, understood that the textile business was a financial black hole. Good money was being thrown after bad, capital that could be deployed far more productively in other ventures. He made the brutally difficult but correct long-term decision to close the mills for good in 1985. He faced the front-page story, "Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway closes historic textile operations." It was a painful headline, but it was an honest one, reflecting a sound business strategy. He chose the larger, later reward, the financial health and explosive future growth of the parent company, over the smaller, sooner reward of avoiding the immediate pain of closure. This demonstrates a mastery over his own psychological wiring. This battle is compounded by another cognitive trap, the overconfidence effect. We systematically overestimate our own knowledge and our ability to predict the future. This bias leads executives to believe they can manage the risks of an unethical decision. They think, we can cut this corner and we won't get caught. I'm smart enough to handle the fallout if we do. This was the thinking of the traders at Salomon Brothers. They were brilliant, they were successful, and they became convinced that they were untouchable, that they could outsmart the regulators. The newspaper test is a powerful antidote to overconfidence because it introduces an element of humility. It forces the decision-maker to step outside their own ego-driven narrative and view their actions from the perspective of a skeptical outsider. The unfriendly reporter is not impressed by your past successes or your self-proclaimed genius. They are only interested in the facts of the action. This shift in perspective helps to break the spell of overconfidence and allows for a more realistic assessment of the potential consequences, fostering a CEO mindset grounded in reality, not hubris. To transform this psychological understanding into a daily practice, we need to go beyond simply thinking about the test and move toward a more structured application. The 10-10-10 rule, a mental model popularized by business writer Susie Welch, serves as a perfect companion piece to the newspaper test. It provides a temporal framework that complements the public accountability framework of Buffett's method, creating a comprehensive tool for robust decision-making. The 10-10-10 rule forces you to analyze a decision through 3 distinct time horizons. What will be the consequences of this decision in 10 minutes? What will they be in 10 months? And what will they be in 10 years? Let's walk through a common business scenario using this combined blueprint. Imagine you are an entrepreneur running a software company. A huge potential client is about to sign a multi-million-dollar contract, but at the last minute they ask for a new feature that your product doesn't currently have. Your engineering team tells you it will take at least 6 months to build it properly. However, your head of sales suggests a solution. You can create a temporary unstable patch that mimics the feature, sign the client, and then hope you can build the real version before they notice the problems. This is a classic short-term versus long-term dilemma. Let's apply the blueprint. First, the 10-10-10 analysis. In 10 minutes, what are the consequences of taking the deal? Euphoria. You've landed the big client. You pop the champagne. Your sales team celebrates. Your investors are thrilled. The immediate reward is massive and positive. Now, what are the consequences in 10 months? The unstable patch is causing constant crashes for your new, most important client. Their support tickets are piling up. Your engineers are overworked, trying to fix the patch while also building the real feature, and they are falling behind. Your new client is angry and feels deceived. Your team's morale is plummeting. The short-term euphoria has curdled into long-term chaos. Finally, what are the consequences in 10 years? Your company may have survived, but it has earned a reputation for overpromising and under-delivering. The huge client eventually left, and they told others in the industry about their negative experience. Your company is now known as a second-rate player, struggling to attract top-tier clients and top-tier talent. The decision to take the shortcut for a short-term win has severely limited your long-term potential. Now let's overlay the newspaper test. The action is knowingly selling a client an unstable, unfinished product while presenting it as a complete solution. The headline written by our unfriendly reporter would be, "Your company name deceives major client with faulty software to secure contract." Imagine your mentor, an experienced and ethical business leader, reading that. Imagine your top engineer who you sold on a vision of quality and innovation reading that. The feeling is one of deep shame and regret. The combined result of these two models is an undeniable, crystal-clear answer. Do not take the deal under these false pretenses. The correct path, illuminated by this blueprint, is to go back to the client and be transparent. Explain what is possible and what is not. Propose a timeline for building the feature correctly. Perhaps you lose the deal today. That will be painful. but you will have preserved your most valuable asset, your integrity. The client may even respect your honesty and come back later. And 10 years from now, you will be running a company known for its quality and trustworthiness, a business with a durable competitive advantage and a solid foundation for growth. This blueprint is not just for CEOs, it's for everyone. For an employee, it can help you decide whether to stay silent about a problem you see or to speak up. For a manager, it can guide you on how to deliver difficult feedback. It is a universal tool for aligning your short-term actions with your long-term values and goals, which is the very definition of a successful career and a well-lived life. The alternative to this deliberate, structured way of thinking is the path of least resistance. It's the default mode for most people and organizations, a reactive, chaotic approach to decision-making that prioritizes expediency over excellence. This is the world of the tyranny of the urgent, where the squeaky wheel always gets the grease and there is never time to think about the long-term consequences. A hallmark of this antithetical path is the worship of quarterly earnings. For many publicly traded companies, the 90-day cycle of reporting to Wall Street becomes the sole determinant of strategy. The CEO's primary job is no longer to build a lasting enterprise, but to meet or beat the earnings per share expectations of analysts. This creates immense pressure to make short-term cosmetic moves that look good on paper but are destructive in the long run. A company might slash its research and development budget to boost profits for a quarter. In 10 minutes, the stock price pops. The CEO is praised. In 10 months, the company's innovation pipeline begins to dry up. But by the time the consequences are felt 10 years later, when the company has lost its competitive edge to more forward-thinking rivals, the CEO who made the decision is long gone, having cashed out their stock options. This is a systemic failure of the newspaper test. The headline "CEO sacrifices company's future for short-term stock bump" is never written in the moment. It's only written a decade later, in the company's obituary. This short-term focus also poisons corporate culture. When the only thing that matters is hitting the number, employees learn that the how is irrelevant. This is how a company like Wells Fargo ends up with millions of fake accounts. The pressure from the top was relentless and focused on a single, simplistic metric. The system incentivized fraud. The antithesis is also visible in the world of entrepreneurship, particularly in the obsession with growth hacking. This term often refers to clever, low-cost strategies to acquire users, but it can also be a euphemism for manipulative and ethically questionable tactics. This might include using misleading advertising, creating confusing subscription models that are hard to cancel, or spamming potential customers. The growth hacker is focused on one thing: user acquisition, fast. In 10 minutes, the user growth chart goes up and to the right, which looks great in a pitch deck to investors. In 10 months, the company has a high churn rate because the users who were tricked into signing up quickly realize the product doesn't deliver and they leave. In 10 years, the company has failed because it never built a sustainable business model based on genuine customer value. It was a house built on a foundation of sand, and the first gust of wind blew it over. This path of the 99% is seductive because it offers the illusion of progress. The numbers go up, the praise comes in, and it feels like you're winning. But it is a hollow victory. It is the equivalent of an athlete taking steroids. You might win the race today, but you are destroying your body and your reputation in the process. The newspaper test and the 10-10-10 rule are the tools of the corporate athlete who is training for the marathon, not the sprint. They understand that true success is not a single event but a long, compounding process of making sound, ethical decisions day after day, year after year. The financial connection between this disciplined long-term approach and tangible wealth is direct and profound. It is about avoiding the catastrophic costs of short-term thinking and harnessing the immense power of compounding value. When a company uses the blueprint of the 10-10-10 rule and the newspaper test, it makes fundamentally different capital allocation decisions. It will choose to invest heavily in research and development, even if it depresses quarterly earnings, because it understands that innovation is the engine of long-term growth. A dollar invested in R&D today might not show a return for years, but when it does, it can create entirely new markets and generate billions in revenue, as we've seen with companies like Apple and Amazon. Conversely, the company on the path of the 99%, by cutting R&D, is essentially eating its own seed corn. It enjoys a small, one-time meal today at the cost of having no harvest tomorrow. The financial impact of this can be quantified. Studies have shown that companies with a strong focus on long-term value creation consistently outperform their short-term focused peers over any meaningful time horizon. Their stock prices are less volatile, their growth is more sustainable, and they create significantly more shareholder wealth over the long run. Let's consider the direct financial cost of a scandal born from short-term thinking. After the Volkswagen emissions scandal, Dieselgate, came to light, the company's market capitalization plummeted by over 25 billion euros in just a few days. The eventual cost in fines, recalls, and legal settlements exceeded 30 billion euros. This is a direct, quantifiable penalty for failing the newspaper test. The decision to install defeat devices to cheat on emissions tests was a classic short-term shortcut. It saved the company money on engineering and allowed them to market their cars as, quote, clean diesel. But the cost of that deception, when it inevitably came to light, was hundreds of times greater than any potential savings. It was a financially irrational decision masked as a clever engineering solution. This framework also directly impacts a company's revenue line through customer loyalty. A business that consistently makes decisions that are fair and transparent builds a deep reservoir of trust with its customers. These customers are more likely to become repeat buyers. They are less sensitive to price changes, and they act as brand ambassadors, promoting the company through word of mouth. This trust premium is a powerful financial asset. It reduces marketing costs because your best customers are doing the marketing for you, and it creates a more predictable and stable revenue stream. The company that takes shortcuts, on the other hand, is in a constant, expensive battle to acquire new customers because their old ones are always leaving in frustration. Their revenue is volatile, and their growth is built on a leaky bucket. Ultimately, the financial wisdom here is about playing a long game in a world that is obsessed with short-term scores. It's about building a fortress of a balance sheet and a reputation so strong that it becomes a competitive moat, protecting the business from the inevitable storms of the market and the foolishness of competitors. It is the slow, steady, and unstoppable path to compounding both wealth and character. At the very heart of the newspaper test is a profound and deceptively simple choice that every person and every leader must make. It is the choice between what Warren Buffett calls the inner scorecard and the outer scorecard. This distinction is perhaps the most important concept for understanding his philosophy of success. The outer scorecard is a life lived in reaction to the expectations and judgments of others. Your sense of self-worth is derived from your job title, the size of your house, the number of awards on your wall, or the praise you receive from your peers. You are in essence a puppet, and the world is pulling your strings. You make decisions based on what will be popular, what will get you promoted, what will be applauded. The inner scorecard, by contrast, is a life lived by an internal set of values, a personal code of conduct. Your self-worth comes from knowing that you have lived up to your own standards, regardless of whether the world recognizes it or not. You are guided by your own conscience. The central question of your life becomes, would you rather be the world's greatest lover, but have everyone think you're the world's worst lover? Or would you rather be the world's worst lover, but have everyone think you're the world's greatest lover? The person who chooses the inner scorecard would, of course, choose to actually be the world's greatest lover. The reality is what matters, not the perception. This concept was deeply instilled in Warren by his father, Howard Buffett, a man of uncompromising integrity. Howard served 4 terms in the U.S. Congress as a Republican from Nebraska. He was a man of principle in an environment that often rewards compromise and expediency. A powerful anecdote from his life shows the origin of Warren's thinking. After World War II, President Truman proposed the Truman Doctrine, a policy to provide financial aid to Greece and Turkey to contain the spread of communism. It was a massively popular bipartisan initiative. To vote against it was seen as politically foolish, even unpatriotic. But Howard Buffett believed it was a dangerous expansion of presidential power and an unwise foreign entanglement. Despite immense pressure from his party and the public, he voted his conscience. He voted no. He knew the headline in the Omaha World Herald would not be favorable. He knew it would cost him political capital. But his inner scorecard was clear. He would rather fail in the eyes of others while upholding his own principles than succeed by betraying them. This lesson was the bedrock of Warren's education. He learned that the only applause that truly matters is your own. The newspaper test is the operational tool for living by the inner scorecard. It seems like a paradox. The test uses an external, public mechanism, a newspaper, to validate an internal, private decision. But it's not a paradox at all. The test isn't about asking, will this make me popular? It's about asking, is this action something that I, at my core, would be proud for the world to see? The newspaper isn't the judge and jury. It is merely the mirror. It reflects your actions back at you without the flattering filters of your own rationalizations. It forces you to see yourself as others would see you, and then to judge that reflection against your own internal standards. The person living by the inner scorecard can withstand the pressures of the crowd, the lure of the easy buck, and the fear of temporary unpopularity, because they are playing a different game. Their goal is not to win the approval of the stadium, but to be able to look themselves in the mirror and respect the person they see. The psychological principle that anchors the inner scorecard philosophy is the concept of locus of control. Developed by psychologist Julian Rotter in the 1950s, this theory describes the degree to which people believe they have control over the outcomes of events in their lives. A person with a strong internal locus of control believes that their own actions, choices, and efforts are the primary determinants of their success or failure. They take ownership of their lives. A person with a strong external locus of control believes that their life is primarily shaped by outside forces, luck, fate, other people's actions, or systemic factors. They often see themselves as victims of circumstance. Cultivating an inner scorecard is synonymous with developing a strong internal locus of control. You are the author of your own story. The newspaper test is a powerful psychological tool for strengthening this internal locus. When you filter a decision through the test, you are implicitly stating, I am responsible for this action. I am accountable for its consequences. I am willing to put my name on it. This is the opposite of the external locus mindset, which seeks to blame others or diffuse responsibility. The leaders of the old Salomon brothers displayed a classic external locus of control. After the scandal broke, their initial response was to blame a single rogue trader, Paul Moser. They tried to position themselves as victims of his actions. But Buffett, by stepping in and accepting total responsibility before Congress, demonstrated an extreme internal locus of control. He essentially said, this happened on my watch, and I am responsible for fixing it. This act of taking ownership is what restored credibility and saved the firm. Another psychological force at play is our deep-seated need to avoid cognitive dissonance. This is the mental discomfort experienced by a person who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values, or is confronted by new information that conflicts with existing beliefs. For example, if you believe you are an honest person, but you lie to a customer, you will experience cognitive dissonance. To resolve this discomfort, you have two choices. You can either change your action, stop lying, or you can change your belief. Convince yourself that the lie was justified, that you are not so honest after all, or that honesty is not that important. The newspaper test forces this conflict into the open before the action is even taken. It creates a state of cum-60 anticipated, dimes cognitive dissonance. You believe you are a person of integrity. The test presents you with a clear picture of an action that would violate that belief. The mental discomfort this generates is a powerful signal to choose the path that is consistent with your core values. It helps you maintain a coherent and consistent self-image, which is a cornerstone of psychological well-being and effective leadership. Living by the outer scorecard, in contrast, is a recipe for chronic cognitive dissonance. You are constantly forced to reconcile the person you want to appear to be with the actions you are taking to achieve that appearance. This internal conflict leads to stress, anxiety, and a fragile sense of self. The inner scorecard, enforced by the newspaper test, is the path to psychological coherence and a solid, unshakable sense of identity. It's about ensuring that the person you are in private is the same person you are willing to be in public. Let's transform this theory into a granular, step-by-step process, the practical application of the public mirror. This is how you take the idea of the inner scorecard and make it a reflexive, intuitive part of your decision-making apparatus. We will call this the headline simulation. Step 1 is to isolate and articulate. Take the complex, fuzzy decision you are facing and distill it down to a single, clear, proposed action. Get rid of all the conditional clauses and ambiguous language. For instance, instead of "we're going to explore a more aggressive marketing strategy," articulate the specific action. We are going to launch a marketing campaign that compares our product to our main competitors by highlighting a known weakness in their design that we discovered through a leaked internal document. The clarity is uncomfortable, and that's the point. Step 2 is to write the unfriendly headline. This is the core of the newspaper test we've discussed. But the key is the word unfriendly. You are not writing the headline you want to see. You are writing the headline a skeptical, perhaps even hostile, journalist would write. In our example, a friendly headline might be "New campaign highlights product superiority." An unfriendly headline would be "Your company name uses leaked competitor documents in new attack ad." The latter is more likely to be the public's perception, and it forces a more honest evaluation. Step 3 is the emotional response audit. Read your unfriendly headline out loud. Then, close your eyes and pay close attention to your immediate physical and emotional reaction. Don't analyze it, just feel it. Is there a tightening in your chest? A feeling of heat in your face? A knot in your stomach? These physiological responses are your subconscious mind, your gut, screaming its verdict. Shame, fear, and dread are unmistakable signals. Conversely, if you read the headline and feel a sense of calm, conviction, or even pride, that is an equally powerful signal. Your gut is telling you that this action is aligned with your inner scorecard. Step 4 is the 5 whys. This is a technique borrowed from industrial engineering, used to get to the root cause of a problem. Here, we use it to get to the root motivation of an action. If the headline generated a negative emotional response, ask yourself, why am I still considering this? For our marketing example, why are we considering using the leaked document? Answer, because we need to gain market share quickly. First, why? Why do we need to gain market share so quickly? Answer, because our investors are putting pressure on us for faster growth. Second, why? Why are our investors putting pressure on us? Answer, because we promised them unrealistic growth targets in our last funding round. Third, why? By the third to fifth why, you have moved past the surface-level justification and arrived at the root issue. In this case, the problem isn't the marketing campaign. It's a flawed business strategy based on overpromising. The solution is not to launch an unethical campaign, but to have an honest conversation with your investors and reevaluate your growth strategy. This blueprint turns the newspaper test from a simple yes-no filter into a powerful diagnostic tool. It not only tells you what not to do, but it helps you understand the underlying pressures and flawed assumptions that pushed you toward the bad decision in the first place, allowing you to address the root cause and become a more effective leader and decision-maker. The antithesis of the inner scorecard life is the desperate, exhausting pursuit of status. It is a life defined by the outer scorecard, where your worth is measured by external symbols. This is the path of the 99%, a hamster wheel of comparison and envy fueled by social media and societal pressure. The person living by the outer scorecard is not the captain of their own ship. They are a cork, bobbing in the ocean of public opinion. Their career choices are dictated by prestigious titles, not by genuine interest. Their business strategies are driven by what is fashionable, not by what is sound. Their personal life is curated for an audience, a performance of success rather than the quiet enjoyment of it. A devastating modern example of this is the 2019 college admission scandal, codenamed Operation Varsity Blues. This was a scheme where wealthy, high-status parents paid enormous bribes to have their children admitted to elite universities like Yale, Stanford, and USC. These were parents who, by any external measure, were already winners. They were successful CEOs, famous actresses, and prominent lawyers. They had already won the game of the outer scorecard. And yet, they were so deeply trapped in it that they were willing to commit federal crimes to utterly fail the newspaper test for one more gold star, one more prestigious bumper sticker on their car. They were not driven by a genuine concern for their children's education. They were driven by a desperate need to maintain and enhance their own social standing. Their actions were the logical endpoint of a life lived entirely for the approval of others. The headline was inevitable. Wealthy parents, including Hollywood stars, charged in massive college cheating scandal. The public shame was immense, but the real tragedy was the exposure of a deep, internal emptiness. They had no inner scorecard to guide them, no sense of self-worth independent of their child's college acceptance letter. This mindset also infects corporate life. It leads to what is known as isomorphic mimicry, where companies copy the superficial practices of successful firms without understanding the underlying principles. A company might build a fancy Google-style campus with free lunch and ping-pong tables, believing this is the secret to innovation. But they fail to replicate Google's deep-seated engineering culture and commitment to long-term projects. The result is a company that looks innovative on the outside, but is hollow on the inside. It's all outer scorecard, no inner scorecard. The profound danger of this path is that it has no finish line. The person chasing status can never be satisfied because there will always be someone with a bigger title, a larger fortune, or more applause. It is a game designed to be lost. The inner scorecard, on the other hand, offers a different kind of prize: contentment. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are living in alignment with your values. As Buffett has said, the key is to hang out with people who are better than you are, and you'll drift in that direction. Living by the inner scorecard doesn't just make you a better person. It makes you a better investor, a better leader, and a better entrepreneur, because you are guided by a consistent internal compass rather than the chaotic, unreliable signals of the outside world. The financial dividends of operating from an inner scorecard, policed by the newspaper test, are immense and enduring. This is where ethics and economics merge, creating a powerful engine for wealth creation. Let's trace the flow of money directly from this principle. First, it leads to superior risk management. A company with a strong, inner scorecard corporate culture empowers its employees at all levels to be risk managers. An engineer who feels safe to say, "This product is not ready to ship," despite the pressure from sales, is saving the company from a potentially disastrous product recall and the associated warranty claims, lawsuits, and brand damage. A compliance officer who is celebrated for killing a profitable but ethically questionable deal is saving the company from billions in future regulatory fines. This culture is a direct financial asset. The fines levied against Wells Fargo for its scandal were in the billions. The cost to Volkswagen for Dieselgate was in the tens of billions. These are not just numbers, they represent a permanent destruction of shareholder capital. A company that instills the newspaper test in its employees is building an immune system that actively seeks out and destroys these kinds of existential threats before they can metastasize. This directly protects the wealth of the company's owners. Second, an inner scorecard approach creates extraordinary partnership and deal flow opportunities. Warren Buffett is famous for getting phone calls that no one else gets. In the depths of the 2008 financial crisis, with credit markets frozen and panic in the air, Goldman Sachs and Bank of America didn't turn to other banks or private equity firms for a lifeline. They called Warren Buffett. They needed not only his capital but also his stamp of approval. An investment from Berkshire Hathaway was the ultimate signal to the market that these institutions were sound. This allowed Buffett to negotiate incredibly favorable terms, securing billions of dollars in future profits for Berkshire shareholders. These deals were not available to anyone else, at any price. They were a direct financial return on a 50-year investment in building a reputation for integrity. His inner scorecard had become the world's outer scorecard for trust. For an individual, this same principle applies. The person with a reputation for honesty, hard work, and reliability, the person who consistently passes the newspaper test in their professional life, gets the best opportunities. They are the first person their boss thinks of for a promotion. They are the person former colleagues call when a great new position opens up. They are the entrepreneur that venture capitalists are most willing to back. Their career trajectory is steeper, and their lifetime earning potential is significantly higher. This is the financial power of character. Finally, living by the inner scorecard protects you from the single greatest destroyer of wealth, your own stupid mistakes. Charlie Munger has often said that a huge part of Berkshire's success is due to, quote, consistently not doing stupid things. Most catastrophic financial losses, both personal and corporate, are not the result of bad luck. They are the result of greed, ego, and dishonesty leading to a single, terrible decision. They are the result of a failed newspaper test. The investor who gets lured into a get-rich-quick scheme, the executive who commits accounting fraud, the entrepreneur who lies to their customers, they are all making unforced errors that wipe them out of the game. The inner scorecard is the discipline that keeps you at the table, allowing the magic of compounding to work for you over a lifetime. It is the ultimate tool for wealth protection, ensuring that the money you make is the money you keep. There is a force in the universe as powerful and as reliable as gravity, the principle of compounding. Albert Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. It is the engine that turns small, consistent efforts into massive, world-changing results. We typically think of compounding in financial terms, interest earning interest. But Warren Buffett's true genius lies in his understanding that this principle applies not just to money, but to everything that matters: knowledge, relationships, and, most importantly, character. A reputation for integrity is not built overnight. It is the result of thousands of small, ethical decisions, compounded over decades. Each time you keep a promise, each time you give credit where it's due, each time you choose the honest path when a dishonest one would be easier, you are making a small deposit in your reputational bank account. These deposits are tiny on their own, but over time they begin to earn interest, creating a virtuous cycle. This is the compounding calculus of character. A perfect illustration of this principle in action is the story of Buffett's acquisition of Nebraska Furniture Mart in 1983. The company was founded by Rose Blumkin, a Russian immigrant who arrived in America unable to speak a word of English. With a loan of $500, she started a small furniture store in the basement of her husband's shop in Omaha. Her business philosophy was simple and radical: sell cheap and tell the truth. She was relentlessly honest with her customers. She worked tirelessly, and she drove brutally hard bargains with her suppliers, passing the savings on to her clientele. Over the decades, Mrs. B, as she was known, built a colossal business, the largest home furnishing store in North America. Her reputation for integrity was legendary throughout the Midwest. When Buffett decided he wanted to buy the company, the process was unlike any other corporate acquisition in history. There were no teams of investment bankers, no legions of lawyers, no months of exhaustive due diligence and audits. Buffett simply went to see the 89-year-old Mrs. B and asked her how much she wanted for the business. She named a price, around $60 million. Buffett thought for a moment and said, okay. He wrote a check. The entire deal was based on a 2-page contract that Buffett wrote himself. He didn't even have the company's financial statements audited. Why? Because he knew he wasn't just buying a collection of buildings and inventory. He was buying the compounding result of Rose Blumkin's entire life of integrity. Her reputation was the company's single greatest asset, a moat that no competitor could cross. He trusted her completely. This story is the polar opposite of the Salomon Brothers scandal. Salomon was a company whose culture of cutting corners nearly destroyed it. Nebraska Furniture Mart was a company whose culture of absolute integrity made it an irresistible investment. Mrs. B had spent over 50 years making daily deposits of character. The $60 million check from Warren Buffett was the compounded return on that lifetime of effort. It was a unique opportunity available only to someone with a reputation as sterling as hers, and it was a wise investment for Buffett because that reputation guaranteed the long-term health and success of the business. The psychological phenomenon that explains why a good reputation creates such powerful, accelerating advantages is known as the Matthew effect, a term coined by sociologist Robert K. Merton. It's named after a passage in the biblical Gospel of Matthew. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. In business and in life, this means that success begets more success. The rich get richer. The famous get more famous. And the reputable become more reputable. This creates a powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop. When you establish a reputation for being trustworthy and competent, people want to do business with you. This gives you more opportunities to demonstrate your trustworthiness and competence, which further enhances your reputation, which in turn attracts even more and even better opportunities. It is the social equivalent of a snowball rolling down a hill, growing larger and faster as it goes. This is why early career decisions are so critical. The first few deposits of integrity you make are the hardest, but they lay the foundation for all future compounding. Another powerful psychological principle at work here is signaling theory. In a world of imperfect information, we are constantly looking for credible signals to help us make decisions. A university degree is a signal of intelligence and diligence. A luxury car can be a signal of wealth. In the same way, a long track record of ethical behavior is the most credible signal you can send that you are a valuable long-term partner. When Warren Buffett considered buying Nebraska Furniture Mart, he didn't need to pore over spreadsheets. Mrs. B's 50-year history of selling cheap and telling the truth was a signal so powerful and so clear that it rendered traditional due diligence almost irrelevant. It signaled that her business was sound, her customer relationships were strong, and her culture was solid. This signal allowed for a transaction that was faster, cheaper, and more efficient than any comparable deal between two strangers. The newspaper test is a tool for managing your signal. Every action you take sends a message to the world about who you are. The test forces you to ask, is this the signal I want to be sending? Is this message consistent with the long-term reputation I want to build? By ensuring that every action sends a consistent signal of integrity, you are building a coherent and powerful brand for yourself or your company. This brand then begins to compound, attracting opportunities and talent, and creating the kind of virtuous cycle that leads to extraordinary, long-term success. It turns your character from a passive trait into an active strategic asset that you are consciously and deliberately growing every single day. To harness the power of compounding character, you need a practical blueprint, a framework for making those small daily deposits of integrity. This is not about a single grand gesture, but about building a set of habits and systems that ensure consistency over the long haul. Let's call this the integrity compounding framework. Step 1 is to define your principles. You cannot compound something you haven't defined. Take the time to write down your core operating principles. For a business, this might be your corporate values. For an individual, it's your personal code of conduct. These should be simple, clear, and non-negotiable. Mrs. B's was sell cheap and tell the truth. Ray Dalio at Bridgewater Associates uses the principle of radical transparency. For yourself, it might be never promise what you can't deliver, or always give credit to the team. These principles are the principle in your reputational investment account. You must never, ever allow this principle to be depleted. Step 2 is the small promises habit. The way you build a reputation for keeping big promises is by meticulously keeping all of your small ones. If you say you'll send an email by the end of the day, send it. If you promise to call someone back, call them back. If you commit to a deadline, meet it. Each of these small, kept promises is a deposit. They seem insignificant, but they compound. People learn, on a subconscious level, that your word is your bond. This builds the trust required for them to eventually entrust you with much larger responsibilities. This habit requires a system, a reliable calendar, a to-do list, and the discipline to use them. Step 3 is to practice proactive transparency. Most people are honest when asked a direct question. Compounding integrity requires being honest even when no one is asking. If you make a mistake, own it immediately and proactively. Don't wait to be found out. Inform your boss or your client, explain what happened, and present your plan to fix it. This is a massive deposit into your integrity account. It signals that you value the truth more than your own ego. Similarly, if you see a potential problem on the horizon, raise the alarm early. This demonstrates foresight and a commitment to the collective good. Step 4 is to amplify others. A key way to compound your reputation is to build a reputation for helping others build theirs. When a project is successful, publicly praise the specific contributions of your team members. When a colleague does great work, send a note to their manager. Actively look for opportunities to give credit away. This signals that you are not driven by ego, which makes people want to collaborate with you. It creates a network of allies who will, in turn, speak highly of you, further compounding your reputation. This framework transforms character from a passive trait into an active skill. It is a system for building the single most valuable asset you will ever own, one small, consistent deposit at a time. The antithesis to the patient, compounding calculus of character is the one big score mentality. This is the mindset of the gambler, the get-rich-quick artist, the person who believes that success is about a single, transformative event rather than a long, disciplined process. This mindset is deeply ingrained in our culture, celebrated in stories of overnight lottery winners and speculative day traders who strike it rich. It is the belief that you can bypass the hard work of building value and skip straight to the reward. This mentality is toxic because it justifies cutting corners. If your entire strategy is based on one big future event, a massive startup exit, a huge promotion, a single blockbuster deal, then any small ethical compromises you make along the way seem insignificant. You tell yourself, I'll just do this one shady thing to get the deal done, and once I'm successful, I'll be a great philanthropist and make up for it. This is the rationalization of 1,000 failed entrepreneurs and disgraced executives. It's the belief that a successful outcome can retroactively justify unethical means. A classic example is the world of pump-and-dump schemes in the stock market. A group of promoters will acquire a large position in a cheap, obscure penny stock. They will then flood the internet with misleading or fraudulent positive information about the company to pump up the price. Thousands of unsuspecting small investors, lured by the promise of a one big score, pile in, driving the price up. The original promoters then dump all of their shares at the inflated price, making a huge profit and causing the stock to crash, wiping out the investors who believed the hype. The entire business model is the antithesis of compounding value. It is not about building a sustainable enterprise. It is about a single, extractive, and deceptive transaction. The same mentality can be seen in entrepreneurs who build a business with the sole purpose of selling it as quickly as possible. They are not focused on creating a great product or a lasting company culture. They are focused on dressing up the company for a quick sale, often by juicing short-term growth metrics through unsustainable marketing spending or by making promises to customers that they know the company cannot keep long-term. They are not building a fortress. They are building a movie set, a facade designed to look good for one day, the day of the acquisition. The problem with the one big score mentality is that it is a fundamentally flawed model of how the world works. True, Lasting value is almost always the result of a long, compounding process. Berkshire Hathaway is not the result of one great investment, it is the result of thousands of good decisions made over more than 50 years. A successful career is not the result of one brilliant move, it is the result of decades of showing up, working hard, and being trustworthy. The pursuit of the one big score is a losing game. It encourages reckless risk-taking. It corrodes character, and it almost always ends in failure. The patient, methodical process of compounding integrity is a slower path, but it is the only one that leads to a destination worth reaching. The financial connection here is about the difference between creating transactional value and creating enterprise value. The one big score mentality is focused entirely on transactional value, the profit from a single event. The compounding character approach is focused on building enterprise value, the long-term sustainable worth of an ongoing concern. Enterprise value is driven by intangible assets like brand reputation, customer loyalty, and corporate culture, the very things that are built through the compounding calculus of character. This difference is reflected directly in the valuation multiples that the market assigns to a business. A company that is seen as a one-trick pony or a short-term play will trade at a very low multiple of its earnings or revenue. The market does not believe its success is repeatable. A company with a powerful brand, a loyal customer base, and a reputation for integrity, a company like Apple or Johnson & Johnson, will trade at a much higher multiple. The market is willing to pay a premium for the company because it has faith in its long-term sustainability. This trust premium can account for hundreds of billions of dollars in market capitalization. It is the direct financial return on decades of passing the newspaper test. Furthermore, a reputation for integrity, compounded over time, creates what Buffett calls an economic moat. This is a durable competitive advantage that protects a business from competitors, just as a moat protects a castle. Moats can come in many forms: a low-cost production advantage, a network effect, high switching costs for customers. But one of the most powerful and enduring moats is a trusted brand. When you have a reputation like Mrs. B's for selling cheap and telling the truth, it is almost impossible for a competitor to steal your customers. Even if they offer a slightly lower price, customers will stick with the brand they trust. This moat allows the company to generate high returns on capital for many years, which is the ultimate driver of long-term wealth creation. For an individual, the financial connection is just as direct. A career built on transactional wins, on taking credit for others' work, on job hopping for a slightly higher salary, may have short-term upsides. But a career built on compounding character creates a personal moat. You become the go-to person in your field, the one who is trusted with the most important projects. This gives you immense bargaining power, job security, and access to the most interesting and lucrative opportunities. You are not just earning a salary, you are building a personal enterprise, an invaluable brand of one. This is the financial wisdom of playing the long game. It is the understanding that the greatest returns come not from a single brilliant stroke, but from the relentless patient compounding of a sterling character. We arrive now at the final and perhaps most crucial pillar of this philosophy. It is the stark, terrifying truth that underpins the entire logic of the newspaper test. It is the reason why Warren Buffett, a man known for his gentle grandfatherly demeanor, would say, "Lose a shred of reputation for the firm, and I will be ruthless." It is the principle of asymmetric ruin. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. The relationship between building and destroying is terrifyingly asymmetric. A lifetime of work, a mountain of trust built brick by brick, can be leveled in an instant by a single foolish act. This is the 5-minute fire. The internet and the 24-hour news cycle have weaponized this asymmetry. In the past, a reputational mistake might be confined to a local community or a single newspaper. Today, a single tweet, a leaked video, or an ill-conceived email can circle the globe in minutes, causing permanent and catastrophic damage. The court of public opinion is now permanently in session, it is merciless, and it rarely listens to appeals. A chilling example of this principle in action is the David Sokol scandal at Berkshire Hathaway in 2011. David Sokol was a superstar at Berkshire. He was the chairman of several of its subsidiaries, including NetJets and Mid-American Energy, and was widely considered to be one of the top candidates to succeed Warren Buffett as CEO. He was brilliant, driven, and had a fantastic track record. Then came the acquisition of a chemical company called Lubrizol. In late 2010, Sokol, in his capacity as a Berkshire executive, had been asked to look at potential acquisition targets in the chemical sector. He identified Lubrizol as a possibility, but then, in early January 2011, just a couple of weeks before he would formally recommend that Berkshire Hathaway acquire the company, David Sokol personally bought nearly 100,000 shares of Lubrizol for his own account, an investment of about $10 million. When Berkshire subsequently announced its acquisition of Lubrizol at a price significantly higher than where Sokol had bought his shares, he stood to make a quick, easy profit of about $3 million. When Buffett found out about Sokol's trading, his response was swift and decisive. He didn't try to hide it, he didn't try to spin it. He immediately sought all the facts and, in a press release, laid them out for the entire world to see. He made it clear that Sokol's actions, while likely not illegal, were a clear violation of Berkshire's code of ethics. Sokol had violated the sacred trust placed in him. He had put his own personal, short-term gain ahead of the firm's reputation. Sokol promptly resigned. The potential successor to the throne of Berkshire Hathaway was gone, his career in ruins. Buffett's handling of the situation was a masterclass in crisis management. He understood the asymmetry of ruin. He knew that the slightest hint of a cover-up or a rationalization would do immense damage to Berkshire's hard-won reputation. By being radically transparent and immediately cauterizing the wound, he protected the company. He proved that his statement, "Lose a shred of reputation and I will be ruthless," was not just a folksy saying. It was the absolute law of the land at Berkshire. He was willing to sacrifice his star manager in a heartbeat to protect the company's most valuable asset. The David Sokol story is a terrifying reminder that no one is immune. Even at the highest levels of success, a single lapse in judgment, a single failure of the newspaper test, can trigger a 5-minute fire that consumes everything you've built. The psychological forces that make the 5-minute fire so devastating are deeply rooted in our cognitive architecture. The first and most powerful is our innate loss aversion. As defined by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in their work on prospect theory, we feel the pain of a loss approximately twice as powerfully as we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Losing $100 feels much worse than finding $100 feels good. This is why the threat of losing a reputation that took 20 years to build is such a potent motivator. The potential pain of that loss is so immense that it should, in a rational mind, outweigh any potential short-term gain from an unethical act. The newspaper test is a tool designed to make the prospect of that loss feel viscerally real. It forces you to confront the emotional pain of reputational ruin before you make the fatal mistake. The second psychological factor is the brain's negativity bias. Our minds are like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. We pay more attention to and give more weight to negative information than we do to positive information. This was an evolutionary advantage. For our ancestors, failing to notice a predator had far more severe consequences than failing to notice a patch of berries. In the modern world, this bias means that one negative story about a company or a person can instantly erase the goodwill built up by 1,000 positive actions. The media understands and exploits this. "Man does his job competently for 20 years" is not a headline. "Respected executive caught in scandal" is. The asymmetry of news coverage perfectly mirrors the asymmetry of reputation. This is why the default human response to a mistake, the cover-up, is so disastrous. The instinct to hide a problem is driven by a desire to avoid immediate pain. but the cover-up almost always fails. And when the truth eventually comes out, as it almost always does, the narrative is no longer just about the original mistake. It's about the lie. The public is often willing to forgive an error, but it is deeply unwilling to forgive a deception. The cover-up takes the initial fire and douses it with gasoline. It is a direct violation of the principles of the newspaper test, an attempt to write a false headline in the hopes that the true one will never be discovered. This is a fool's bet, and the price of losing it is total annihilation of trust. Given the terrifying speed and finality of reputational ruin, the only rational approach is to prepare for the fire before it starts. You don't buy fire insurance when you see smoke. You buy it when the sky is clear. This is the concept of the reputational fire drill, a practical blueprint for proactive risk management. Step 1 of your fire drill is to identify your specific ignition risks. Every profession, every industry has its own unique set of ethical temptations and failure points. For a financial advisor, it's the temptation to recommend a product that pays a high commission but is not in the client's best interest. For a journalist, it's the temptation to rush a story without full verification to get a scoop. For a software developer, it's the temptation to ship code with known security vulnerabilities to meet a deadline. Sit down with your team or by yourself and brainstorm the most likely ways you could fail the newspaper test in your specific context. What are the gray areas? Where are the pressures greatest? Create a list of the most dangerous potential, unfriendly headlines for your career or business. Step 2 is to create a pre-mortem for each risk. A pre-mortem is an exercise where you imagine that your reputation has already been destroyed by one of these ignition risks. The fire has happened. Now, working backward, you try to figure out what chain of events and decisions led to the disaster. What was the first small compromise that started the slide? What pressures caused good people to make bad choices? This exercise is incredibly valuable because it helps you identify the subtle, early warning signs of a potential ethical lapse, allowing you to intervene before the problem becomes a crisis. Step 3 is to develop a crisis response protocol. The first few hours after a reputational threat emerges are the most critical. This is not the time to be figuring out your strategy. You need a plan in place. This protocol should answer a few key questions. Who is the first person you call, likely your lawyer or a senior mentor? Who is authorized to speak to the public on your behalf? What is the core principle of your first public statement? The answer to that last question should always be radical transparency and ownership. Your goal is not to win the argument. It is to demonstrate that you are a trustworthy actor who takes responsibility. Buffett's response to the Sokol scandal is the perfect template. He gathered the facts, he presented them without spin, he reaffirmed the company's core values, and he took decisive action. Step 4 is to wargame the plan. A plan that only exists on paper is useless. You need to practice. Run simulations with your team. Present them with a crisis scenario and have them work through the response protocol. These drills build muscle memory so that if a real fire ever breaks out, your team will react with discipline and clarity instead of panic and confusion. This reputational fire drill is the ultimate form of wealth protection. It is the practical application of the idea that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It acknowledges the brutal asymmetry of ruin and prepares you to face it with the same level of seriousness and professionalism that you apply to any other critical business function. The direct financial connection of failing to manage the risk of a 5-minute fire is the most visceral and terrifying part of this entire discussion. The numbers are staggering, and they represent the complete and utter destruction of wealth on a massive scale. When the Volkswagen emissions scandal broke in September 2015, the company's stock price lost a third of its value, representing a loss of over 25 billion euros in market capitalization in a matter of 2 trading days. But that was just the beginning. The total cost, including government fines, vehicle recalls, and legal settlements around the world, has since ballooned to over 30 billion euros. This is a direct financial penalty for a catastrophic failure of the newspaper test. The decision to cheat on emissions tests made by a handful of engineers and executives permanently destroyed an amount of shareholder wealth equivalent to the entire GDP of a small country. The financial consequences for the individuals involved can be even more absolute. Careers that took 30 years to build were ended overnight. Executives were fired, bonuses were clawed back, and some even faced criminal charges and prison time. The future lifetime earning potential of these individuals went from tens of millions of dollars to zero, or even negative, once legal fees were factored in. This is the definition of asymmetric ruin. The potential upside of the cheating, a few years of higher sales and lower production costs, was dwarfed by the eventual downside. It was an infinitely bad bet. We can also see the financial cost in the long-term damage to brand and sales. For years after the Wells Fargo scandal, the bank had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on apology advertising campaigns to try and win back customer trust. They faced intense regulatory scrutiny that limited their ability to grow. The reputational damage acted as a direct ongoing tax on their future earnings. The ultimate financial consequence, of course, is the Enron-style collapse, where the reputational damage is so severe that the company ceases to exist. Enron went from being the 7th largest company in America to being completely bankrupt in less than a year. Its stock went from over $90 a share to less than $1. Thousands of employees lost not only their jobs but also their life savings, which were tied up in the company's now worthless stock. The accounting fraud at Enron was a spectacular, years-long failure of the newspaper test. The financial result was not a penalty. It was an annihilation. For any leader, entrepreneur, or individual, the message is clear. The single most important part of your business strategy and your career advice is to avoid the decision that gets you on the front page for the wrong reasons. The potential financial upside of any ethically questionable act is always finite. The potential financial downside is always infinite. It is the one risk you can never afford to take. The newspaper test is not just a tool for being a good person. It is a ruthless, indispensable algorithm for financial survival and wealth protection in a world where trust is the ultimate currency and reputation is the only asset that truly matters. You have just spent this time investing in an idea, a mental tool of immense power. You now possess the mental framework that has guided the most successful investor in history, a simple test that has protected and built one of the world's great fortunes. You understand that your reputation is your most valuable currency, that character compounds, and that the single foolish act, the 5-minute fire, can destroy a lifetime of work. You have the shield. But this test, as powerful as it is only one pillar in the architecture of Buffett's mind. It's the ultimate tool for defense, for protecting what you have built. But what about the sword? What about the tool he uses to find opportunity where others only see risk? What is the mental model that allows him to act with decisive courage when everyone else is paralyzed by fear? The video on your screen right now is the next piece of that map. It's not just another idea. It is the link that connects proactive defense with opportunistic offense. It bridges the gap between protecting what you have and aggressively building the future you dream of. Most people will stop here, satisfied with one new idea, believing they have learned enough. But you are not most people. The journey to true financial wisdom, to a complete CEO mindset, doesn't end with a single step. It is a process of assembling a latticework of powerful mental models. The next one is waiting for you. Complete your mental arsenal. Become the architect of your own success. Click the video and continue the ascent.